I'm your host, Paul Dio. Today, I have co-founder and CEO of Anura, Rich Kahn. Welcome.
Welcome. Thanks a lot. I appreciate having me on tonight.
Rich, tell us about Anura and how you got here.
Anura is an ad fraud solution, which basically means we identify bots, malware, human fraud forms, generally speaking from advertising. So like if you're buying advertising, everybody knows bots click on your ads. Well, our job is to help identify and mitigate that traffic for you. It actually started, I had another company 20 years ago, and we were having a problem with fraud. We knew what it was. So I went out into the market looking for a product to plug in and solve the problem for us. And nothing existed back then. You're talking 2003, 2004 era. I'm a developer, so I decided to write it myself, solve the problem for us, continue to work with it. About 10 years later, I had clients asking to use the software outside of our network, and we decided to spin it off as its own company, and here we are.
Walk us through kind of the how to identify, or where did you start when you identified what was fraud and what wasn't fraud? What was the indicators that you put into the software?
Well, I used to have a small ad network. Think Google, much smaller, right?
Yeah.
So people would basically come in, they would basically place text ads on our network, and our text ads would show up on, for the most part, blog sites around the globe. Like if you went to Google and did a search, you get the sponsored results, which were generally, sales pitches. You'd scroll down to your organic, and then you'd find, if you're doing research, you'd find some information. We would be on those blogs, those smaller blogs. And we had so many of them that we were pushing 2 or 3 billion searches a day. So it ended up over time expanding and having this large network. Well, we had clients that were buying traffic from us and all of a sudden started saying, hey, we noticed the traffic quality conversion values have gone down.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? So that's when I started doing some research and I realized, oh, it looks like bots, because you might see a click happen on an ad and that same individual, same IP address, same user agent was clicking on multiple ads in a 2-second window. And it was some obvious signs back then were obvious. Not, in today's standard, it's obvious. Back then, it wasn't so obvious. So I started doing some research, and part of the research indicated looking at the user agent. Most people don't know what the user agent is. User agent, just for people who don't know what it is, it basically tells the agent, the software that you use, to connect to a website. So it might tell you, hey, using a Safari version 16, coming off of a Mac, running this software. So it gives you some basic information about the device used to connect to the website. The whole idea behind that is, so if you're coming from an iPhone, okay, you have a mobile, show the mobile unit, right?
Yep.
You have somebody coming from a foreign site, if you have a conversion, a translation site for them, boom, you can do that too. So that's what the user agent is for. But when I started looking at the user agent on some of our traffic, inside the user agent, it said, I'm a bot, catch me if you can. So I'm like, well, I'm not looking at it, and they're kind of rubbing my nose in it that they're getting past my system in some fashion, because back then nothing existed really to stop fraud. So when I saw that, that's when I started putting this process together to identify what to look for, what tails to look for. First, it was easy, then it got more difficult. Today, it's like you got AI involved, and it gets totally off the chart difficult to identify something that we're specializing in. And my developers have been working on this code for the last 20 years. So we've got a lot of experience working on solving this problem, but that's how it started back then.
And is there a particular platform, like for example, like TikTok versus Instagram versus is it based on a certain platform, or is it inflow of traffic from my website? Where are these bots being identified?
Every place you buy traffic.
Got it.
So if you're buying traffic, some way, somehow, somebody's able to make money off that click, right? Off that traffic. Because let's face it, as an advertiser, you pay Google to drive you traffic, TikTok to drive you traffic, Facebook, every network you're out there, you're spending dollars. In fact, last year as a global society, just to put a number on it, over $700 billion was spent on digital marketing. Based on our estimates, and we consider them conservative, over 140 billion was stolen by fraudsters. Mm-hmm. So we tell people this all the time, it's no longer a question of if you have a fraud problem, it's a question of how much fraud do you have. And it really comes down to where you're buying your traffic. Each network has different levels of fraud. Like, Google and Facebook have less fraud than, say, programmatic advertising, banners, video. Each network's a little different. It depends where you're buying traffic from. So our job is to identify and put a number on it where, how much fraud you have and where's it coming from, and then come up with a game plan of how we're going to mitigate that. So if you're losing on average 25% of your traffic to fraud, how do we take that fraudulent traffic, take it away from the fraudsters and give it to the real audience that's going to convert for you, so you can see a lift in ROI?
Yeah. Let's say you do an analysis. Let's say, for example, there's you're buying $100,000 views or what, or 100,000 views, and then you do find that gap. Are you renegotiating the rate of that purchase? Or are you saying what happens at that point when you discover fraud?
Depends on the network on how we mitigate. But let's say we're talking about impressions. So you're talking about programmatic.
Yeah.
You can identify the websites that generated those false interactions and then put them on a blacklist. So you stop getting traffic. So it's the art of avoidance.
Got it.
Very few companies, and some companies, some DSPs, right? That's where you buy your programmatic display advertising from. And we'll work on credits with you because we're going to give you a report that shows you exactly where you're getting it, what type of stuff is fraud. But companies like Google and Facebook, they don't like to be told what to charge their
Yeah.
clients. They're
Yeah.
too big of a company, right? So we work on the art of avoidance.
Okay. Yeah. That's really interesting. Now, since you've been an entrepreneur, since you build this from scratch, it's obviously you're writing code. What's been kind of the most gratifying thing as you're building?
The most gratifying thing in building it really is customer feedback. Like when companies come to you and they're like, oh my God, my company's falling apart. I'm losing clients left and right. Can you help me? And you step in, you identify the problem, you mitigate the problem. And months later, they come back to you and different people from the company are like, oh my God, I know who you guys are. You saved our company. You transformed our business. Like we were on the edge of losing our business and now we're flourishing again. Like when you hear like the clients that are paying you to do this job and they're so grateful, that's the gratifying part. It's fun when you're sitting there and working on the code because I haven't written code in probably 5 years to the software base, but I'm every day I do the stand up meeting with all my developers, understand where they're going, what's going on. But like every once in a while though, they'll come across some really intelligent fraudster who did something totally unique, and it's like hats off to them, but we're going to stop them, right?
Mhm.
So it's just interesting, like when you solve those problems or you make it more difficult for them because you know where it's coming from. Like most of this fraud isn't coming from a single individual. Somebody sitting in the corner. Most of the fraud doesn't come from there. It comes from organized crime around the globe. So you're kind of upsetting their world. Like I
How
said,
does
it's $140 billion last year stolen.
That's insane. How does AI make it more difficult or less difficult, I would say, to be in your position?
So AI is making it more difficult because AI, like when you build a new heuristic that you're looking for, AI can there's a great scene in Jurassic Park. I think it was the first one. Remember where the dinosaurs were poking at the fence, trying to find a weak spot, systematically and they were like, "Oh my God, they're intelligent. They're systematically poking the fence looking for a weak spot."
Yep.
Well, that's what AI can do at just a much more rapid rate. So if you have a hole or there's a loophole, there's a way to get around your code. AI can iterate all kinds of unique ways of penetrating your system much faster, much cleaner. So it makes it more difficult. So, like for example, we spent 2 weeks working on a new algorithmic update. 2 weeks putting it together, launched it, saw it was stopping them. 5 hours later, it was they got around it.
Wow.
But then it took another 2 weeks to put out another thing, and then they weren't able to get around it. So it's like AI would know, if it wasn't AI, and we know it was AI because we can see their code running and we can see what's happening. If it wasn't AI doing that, it might have taken them months to get around that.
Hmm.
But they were able to get around it within hours because AI can just run those iterations and knows what not that it thinks for itself, but it can be smart with its logic and do it a lot faster than a human can.
Hmm. How did you calculate the price or the value of the service that you're providing in the early stages, and how has it evolved to what it is today?
That's a great question because there's no book out there that I've found on how to properly price your SaaS-based solution, right?
Yeah.
And we all know SaaS is cheap to run, but it's expensive to develop. So most people are like, oh my God, SaaS is typically less than 5% of what you sell it for is what it takes to run it. Yeah, that's what the servers cost to run it. But I've got teams of people working on code around the clock to make this what it is today. There's a cost there, right? There's a cost for support. There's a cost for the salespeople. There's a cost for all this other stuff. So how do you price it out? So we looked at our competitors that were in the marketplace at the time and figured out, got an idea of what they were charging, charged a little bit less because we're the new kids on the block and
Yep.
had to prove ourselves. And as we proved ourselves, we've been able to raise our prices so that we feel we're like where we need to be price wise right now. So we're not the most expensive, we're not the cheapest. We're somewhere in the middle. We feel we're like fairly priced for what we do. And generally speaking, when we sell it, it's always about an ROI. So if we got a guy spending $100,000 a month in digital marketing, we light up our software during our free trial and find out that we found $100,000 of lost revenue.
Yeah.
We can solve that for a couple $1,000. That makes sense to them. Like,
Yeah.
we don't adjust our pricing based on the individual client. We don't adjust our pricing based on how much we're finding. Like, we have a set rate card that we use that we go by. But the more they spend on marketing, the higher the ROI is going to be on our product. Because again, our pricing is kind of fixed,
Okay.
you know, based on the number of visitors that we scan. So basically, we price it out based on the number of visitors scanned. So if we're scanning 1 million visitors, we're scanning 1 billion visitors, the pricing is all based on the number of visitors we scan. But the dollars that they spend on that marketing goes up, so the ROI percentage goes way up with the more they spend.
So once you're utilizing Anura, is it recurring in the sense that every single time they're looking, like what's the frequency of use for a client?
Think of it like this way. It's like a firewall,
Mhm.
right? And everybody's familiar with a firewall.
Yep.
It intruders out of your systems, right? So when you put a firewall in place, right? A firewall is designed to cover so much traffic. So if you were Joe Schmo's lawn mowing system, right, you can get away with a small firewall.
Yep.
If you're IBM, you need racks of firewalls, right, to cover
Yep.
it. So the cost is on how many of those servers that you need. Do you ever shut off a firewall?
No,
Why not?
because you need to be
Because you
protected.
don't know when the fraudster is going to come through, right?
Yes. Yes.
So with us, we call ourselves a visitor firewall. And that's kind of what we do. So you always have us running as long as you're spending money on marketing and you want to protect it.
Yep.
And as you bring on new marketing, so like I have clients, I'll give you an example. I just spoke to a client the other day, somebody I've known for years, been a client of ours for years. And they were telling me the story because they were just happy that, we were there and on for them. They were less than 5% fraud because they've been using our data to identify where it's coming from to reduce the fraud. So they've been like systematically checking it. And he goes, and I just happened to log in this month to the dashboard to take a look. And I saw a huge spike. We spiked up to 50% fraud. I did some research. We brought in some new marketing and just the fraud spiked.
Wow.
Same. I was buying from Google, same place. I haven't changed much. We had just a new campaign launch. And inside that new campaign, it spiked to 50%. You guys caught it right away, protected us, did everything you were supposed to do. And now back down under 5%. He goes, so you just never know. He goes, that 5% spike, they're spending 7 figures a month in digital marketing. So with that spike would have cost them a fortune, but we're on protecting them in real time 24/7. So you never take us down unless you're literally just stop paying for marketing.
Yeah. In the early days, how did you build your network, or how did you find your clients? What were some of the things that you were doing in order to grow your business?
Good question. So remember we were using this product ourselves. We finally decided, okay, let's launch it. April 1st of 2017 was the official launch date of Anura as a standalone product. I'm like, okay, great. Now we need clients.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, how am I going to do this? So, I mean, call it old school, but what I did is I sat down every night after work. I went in my basement because it was nice and peaceful down there, couch and everything else. I sit on the couch, open up my laptop, went to LinkedIn. I had 2,000 contacts of people that I've known over the years. This was back in 2017, and wrote a personal email to each and every one of them. Got our first couple clients that way. Joined a couple industry groups, did a couple talks, got a few new clients. Landed our first major client early on, and then got a case study from them and was able to reuse that case study to help us prove that our technology worked into other networks.
Yeah.
And it just started to grow like that.
If you recognize more and more of your competitors, what's going on in your head as far as innovation to the product? What are some of the changes or the pivots that you've had to make as more competition comes out there?
Well, look at it this way. Just to try to talk about competition a little bit, there's probably 80 to 100 companies out in the marketplace that claim they do some type of fraud detection.
Yeah.
And there is an actual industry standard. Are you guys familiar with the IAB?
No.
Okay, so the IAB is the Internet Advertising Bureau. They've been set up for decades, and they're the ones who decide the size of banners. They set policy around digital marketing. They talk about CTV. Anytime there's a policy written about digital advertising, the IAB is involved, and they kind of like set the standards for it. So I want to say 2010 or 11, somewhere around there, they got together with the 4As, another big organization about advertising, digital advertising, and they came up with a set of standards if you're going to be a fraud detection solution because they saw some fraudsters, some people coming out with fake systems that were out in the marketplace. So they figured, all right, let's build a standard for it. And then two companies adopted to say, okay, we're going to certify that a company is following those standards.
Mhm.
So now there's an industry set of standards that are updated on a quarterly basis as fraud evolves. And there's two organizations that can certify whether somebody's actually following those standards. And To this day, so now you're 2025, there's only 7 companies that follow those standards, that are certified to follow those standards.
Mm,
So when I talk about competition, I talk about the 7, right? The 7 that are actually doing things the right way, that are focusing on doing things and being part of the industry and doing things the right way. So when I look at that group of people that are innovating and doing things, it's really about innovating the product because, yeah, you can add lots of bells and whistles to what we do, but at the end of the day, it's like a firewall, right?
mm,
Are you identifying real threats? Are you accurate in identifying those threats? Because our competitors have an average of 15% false positives. And think of it this way: how many times have you come up to select all the street walks, the sidewalks in this picture and failed, right? And
mhm.
had to do it over again,
Yep.
right? Yep. That's a false positive. So the software is designed to identify bots or malware or human fraud farms. Meanwhile, your real people are failing it and it's causing a buyer's journey interruption. So our goal is to identify without giving people puzzles to figure out. We're identifying if they're real or not, and we have to be accurate. So one of the things that we innovated this year was the first company to actually do an accuracy guarantee. And our accuracy is based on 99.999% accurate. So if I identify somebody as fraudulent, I could be wrong 1 in 100,000 times.
Mm,
No other company is even remotely close to that, and no one offers a guarantee around it. For us, that's important because I deal with companies like, should I let this person log into my system? Should I let this person charge their credit card to buy this product? And I have to be accurate and I have to be thorough and I have to find all the threats that are out there. So the innovation for us really comes around improving accuracy and improving thoroughness of what we're catching because fraud continues to evolve.
mhm, mhm.
So if someone comes to me and says, "Oh, you don't offer this feature, you don't offer that feature," it's it's not really they're important. What's important to them is, are you finding fraud and are you accurate about it? Those are the 2 key things that we have to innovate on a weekly basis.
What are you excited about most in the next couple of years?
Well, I just saw an article that said only 2% of the websites out in the marketplace use some type of fraud detection. So growth. I'm excited about the growth because as fraud continues to evolve. So I always tell people, like, I'll talk to a company. I'm like, all right, we identified you have 25% fraud. So now do you want to use us? Right. So the question is, are they going to use us? Well, my question to them is, at what percentage of fraud do you shut down as a business? Right. We can agree that if 100% of your traffic was fraud, you'd be out of business. And they all say yes. I go, so you'll be out of business before 100%, but what's the number? Is it 30%? Is it 40? Is it 50? Like, what's that number? Eventually it'll shut you down. But I asked the industry the same question.
Mhm,
Right now we've identified 21%. I think the numbers work out to 21% of the internet traffic is fraud, and it's growing. At what percentage of fraud does everybody stop buying traffic? This happened back in 2000 when the dot-com bubble burst. A lot of people were buying. All of a sudden, digital marketing came out, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, I'm all in," and they were spending money like crazy. And then they stepped back and realized, "Oh my god, I'm not seeing any conversion for it. I'm spending tens of millions of dollars and not getting any benefit for it. Stop spending." And everybody came to a halt back in April of 2000 and stopped spending, and that's when the dot-com bubble burst. So the question is, if this continues to grow on its own because only 2% of the sites out there use fraud detection, at what point does it get to a point where everyone stops pulling back and stops spending money on digital marketing and it shuts it down?
mhm. Yeah, fascinating. So fascinating. Well, Rich, where can we find more about you and Anura?
So for anybody that's interested in learning about fraud, we have it's Anura.io. So ANURA.io. And we also own the .com, and that's another story. But .io is our main website, right? So if you go there, you can download ebooks on fraud. We have the internet's first ultimate guide on ad fraud. I think it's like a 60 or 70 page ebook. It's free to download. Lots of resources, articles we push out every week. We push out 3 or 4 articles a week, all talking about this process. So if you're looking at any aspect of fraud, we probably have some resource online that you can learn from, and it's all free. If you want to find me, I am very active on LinkedIn. I'm posting probably 4 or 5 days a week. Generally speaking, articles or snippets, video snippets like little reels on, I do a podcast and we find like little snippets like questions and answers. We'll post those on there on a regular basis. I'm on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's easy to find me, Rich Kahn, Anura, and you'll find me.
Amazing. Thank you, Rich, and have a great day.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.